Good afternoon, Campbell, or morning.
So Ed, do you want to walk through the notes on the tutorial for the redemption process?
From consensus side, we have
Sure, let me get those up here.
Cool. I'm gonna.
How was your holiday break? Pretty good.
I'm gonna mute because I'm here at the Microsoft Technology Center. It's pretty wide, noisy here, so I'm gonna.
Where's the link? Do we have a link for that tutorial?
Yeah, Jim, I'll paste it here. I think that's visible. Share that.
Yeah, it's view only. You might want to change it to comment. I don't know.
I don't, but
No.
We can take comments here. It's hard to deal with a lot of comments from a wide variety of people at this stage. But yeah, please speak up if you see some big issue. So am I sharing just my left side of the screen, this document? Okay.
We just see one. Just see the browser window.
Okay. Okay. So the document first describes sort of the rationale for the redemption and the background. We've talked a lot on the channel about this, so I'm not going to go over that section in detail. The redemption period will be hopefully will start tomorrow morning Pacific time. There are some. Could HJ, could you mute, please?
Yeah.
So hopefully things will be on schedule to start tomorrow morning, and we'll run through the 20th. So the redemption process will require that users have both an Ethereum account, an Ethereum wallet, as well as an Omni wallet. So everyone that wants to participate could make sure that they're set up in those. And exchange addresses should not be used. So on the Ethereum side, we recommend My Ether wallet. And on Omni, we recommend Omni wallet. And just to help understand the rationale why the Omni wallet is requested and required is in the case that amps would need to be returned, we want to make sure they get back to you as opposed to get back to an exchange. And then also there's a note here that since Omni transactions require Bitcoins as the fee, you'll need to also make sure that that Omni wallet has some small amount of Bitcoin in it as well. Okay, then when the redemption period begins, you'll navigate to the RChain.coop site, and we'll have a pointer there to the actual application, the web app that you'll enter that information. So you'll enter in your AMP address, which is a Bitcoin address, by the way. And then you'll also enter your Ethereum account address to where the rocks will be eventually received. There'll be terms and conditions that you'll agree to, and you'll press submit, and then the web application is going to check whether or not the AMP address controls any AMPs that were introduced into circulation past the 12th of December. And so that was the date. We want to make sure that essentially that scenario decided at that date to no longer support RChain. So any activity coming out of certain scenario treasury and related wallets, we will return back to the user. So we'll consider transactions flowing out of that came into circulation as tainted. We don't know how many there of those kinds of transactions there may be. Even if you purchase through an exchange, there's some possibility you picked up some tainted amps in that sense, even through no fault of your own. But we think that's unlikely at this point. As of today, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 8 days or so. And then, assuming that checks out cleanly, you'll be provided with a receipt ID that will help you come back and track later. And then you'll be presented with an AMP address to which you need to send amps into. Okay, so then you'll go out to that Omni wallet and transfer amps to that specified address. And then after some time, you'll be able to check the transmission status by providing the receipt ID that you had. So then at that point, the system's going to record your Ethereum address and the amount of amps into a contract on the Ethereum blockchain that's called the redemption receipt contract. And you can think of this as just being an immutable log for this process. And we'll provide a URL to a block explorer where you can see and confirm what's kind of coming into that, as well as seeing not just your transaction, but others that are coming into that. And then at the end of the redemption period, which we're planning for January 20th at midnight, a server process is going to go through and read that redemption receipt contract and distribute rocks to what's called the ERC20 contract, which is a standard token contract on the Ethereum network. And then we'll also announce that ERC20 contract address at that point. So let's take any questions now about what I've said or related.
And first of all, I want to thank you for giving that summary. I think that was very good, very clear, and I don't think I would have any improvements on that. I think that was very
Great.
Very.
It's complicated, but all the constraints around the process led to this workflow.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a number of the total supply of tokens being minted? Is it just in parity with the total AMP supply? Is it like 1 billion tokens or whatever it is?
Yes, that's correct. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So just so that people are clear, we have minted already the number of rocks equal to the number of amps. When the redemption process closes out, we will then know the percentage of amps that were redeemed, and at that point we will then make it so that the rocks in circulation versus the rocks held in treasury, that ratio is exactly the same as the amps in circulation versus amps held in treasury. So we will burn the remaining rocks.
So Greg, just a clarification, when you're talking about the ratio, that's the ratio as it was middle of December, as opposed to what it might be at the end of the token redemption process, because scenario.
That's correct, yes.
Depending on,
as of December 12th, 2016. Yes, that's correct.
So another quick question, and this is just general. So we're doing the swap. Then you have all these tokens left over, similar to what Scenario has. They just have a bunch of tokens after their ICO in 2015. So what is the plan to use these tokens after this redemption event, in a general sense? Because people are asking, well, hey, you're going to have all these extra tokens. What are you going to do with them?
So the amps will be held in a multi-sig wallet by the co-op, and the co-op will sell them in a reasonable fashion so that we don't destroy the market, the amp market.
And rock tokens, what there's There's going to be hundreds of millions of them, right? So are they just held for future funding rounds, over-the-counter sales, funding RChain projects? Is that just the general sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, the point is to keep the rock position equivalent to the amp position, so people who have redeemed maintain the same risk profile. So right now there's a current risk profile that the amp holders have because Scenario holds so many amps in treasury. So we'll maintain exactly that, and so we have this supply of rock tokens that we will, utilize potentially to, provide bounties on fixing bugs and various kinds of community tasks like that. So that's the idea.
Yeah, we'll keep it simple.
Do you think like 1 week is enough time for everybody to make the swap? I remember like some months ago, you were saying that you wanted to make sure that everybody's going to make the swap, and it sounded that it rather is like an open-end period for doing the swap. So why now the change to just 1 week?
One of the things that we have to do as a means of protecting the co-op from any sort of consideration that that this might be a security is to complete this process before it gets listed on an exchange. And we happen to know that there are many parties who are planning to there are many parties who plan to list this on an exchange. So we need to make sure that before anything like that happens, that we shut down this process. Because then there's a feedback loop between what's happening on the exchange and the conversion of amps. So we just have to, stay squeaky clean on this, and that's why we after our review process, which has been somewhat intense and lengthy, it made more sense. Also, the other thing was we analyzed the signal within the community, and it seems like the signal travels fast enough within the community. People find out and are able to make a decision in a reasonable within the time frame that we've allotted for the process.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure. Okay, so I wonder if, unless there are any other questions about the redemption process, or unless anyone else thinks that we should address any other issues around the redemption process, maybe we can move on to talking about some other stuff, which is really fun.
Just one small point is that Dor stated that it was a misstatement of fact that Scenario Ltd board decision of December 12th not to develop the RChain platform, saying that's a false statement.
Yeah, so I'll just be super clear. The RChain architecture document was produced by an independent contractor who was not under contract with Scenario. So just be super clear about that. The RChain architecture document was produced by an independent contractor, namely Ed Eichholt, who was not under contract with Scenario. And it was put under a Creative Commons license and is in the public domain. So anybody is free to go and build out whatever they think the RChain architecture is. All of the code samples are in a public repo and not under copyright at all.
Yeah, the only issue is whether that's a factual statement, that the board decided that on December 12th.
Okay, well, they can make whatever claims they want. I tend not to spend a lot of time thinking about what people who people who are not able to keep promises in at the scale of $5 million I don't really listen to them very much. So they can make statements to their heart's content, but it doesn't command my attention.
While we're on this topic, I think it's a good time to mention that the portion of the architecture document that's ready to be published in accordance with the timeline of the redemption program is available now. It starts from an introduction as to what RChain is and goes all the way through Rolang. This will be added to the Read the Docs host as well as the GitHub, and I'm pasting the link right now in the chat, and it'll be available on Slack.
Sweet, and thank you so much for your hard work on this, Joe. I know you put in a lot of time on this, and I also want to thank everyone else who's done that. So I'm really excited.
Of course.
Yeah, this is so cool, you know. And I think that the one thing that I'm so grateful for and humbled by and just like astounded by is just, you know, there are so many people who are stepping up, and really a community is emerging, and that gives me just this amazingly good feeling that they're, you know, this is something that, you know, is more than just one person, right? This is a community of people who are stepping up and engaging and making it happen. And that's the only way this thing is going to happen, is if, you know, a community of people emerges around it and the work gets done. So it's really cool. Actually, to that end, there's this wonderful email from Ian. Let's see if I can find it here. So Ian was riffing on the whole rock theme. You know, because it's kind of funny. Like, nobody in their right mind would name their crypto token rocks, right? It's like the least sexy name ever. But of course, Ian found this really, really positive interpretation, which is the whole stone soup story, right? And that, you know, making soups out of rock or making a soup out of rocks is it only really happens if it's a community effort. You know, that was really kind of the moral of that story, and I thought it was a really, really great observation. So thanks to Ian for that, and thanks to everyone who's engaging and making this thing happen. Cool. Along those lines, Joe, you also you've started interviewing me on the Row VM.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So do you want to say a little bit about that series?
Right. So the goal is to create a Row VM series. We had the first one last night that gave a very, very wide sweeping introduction to what Row VM is and why we've made the design choices that we have. The goal is for them to get more specific in a componential form as they proceed. So we're going to start with, ideally, because I'm just a visual learner, a diagram that explains, you know, every general concept that we can think of and ties everything into Row VM. And then the subsequent discussions will just dive into that specific component. So we had the last one last night. Christian, I'm sure, can post.
Yeah, so I need to upload that. I didn't get around to it, but I need to do like 2 quick edits to it, but it will be up this afternoon, and I will post that link. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. And then the goal is, and obviously they're, in the future, I would hope anyway that they're open to the public. This is just a chance for a directed, sequential, and increasingly specific discussion about Row VM. So it's out there.
Sweet. That's really, really cool. So in terms of other developments, one of the things I wanted to show people, RChain has already been given a seat at the table. I don't know if you can see where I am, but I'm in the Microsoft Technology Center here in New York City. And that's because there's an invitation-only event that brings together a number of people who are interested in the public-private chain interface. And they're coming together. Probably soon. A formal body will emerge. I can't say much more than that. But we are actually here crafting the helping this community craft the roadmap. And RChain itself is having a kind of already having an influence within the industry. Additionally, I don't know if people picked this up a few weeks ago, but RChain has already made it onto the European community. So the European community has hired Henning Dietrich to do a formal comparison of chains as a part of their decisions at the public level for the use of blockchain technology within European community projects. And RChain is now listed within that matrix. That evaluation is a part of the European community study. And what's really interesting is that even taking into account its very nascent state with respect to the maturity of the code and other kinds of things, it stacks up really well against every other chain. In terms of, there's a matrix that's like 100 or so questions long, and relative to the other chains, RChain stacks up really quite well. And so I think this is very encouraging data that we're on the right path here. We're already, people are beginning to take notice of the architecture and give us a seat at the table. Even before we have nodes stood up. So I think that's a very strong sign of the level of interest and also the level of confidence in the technological approach. And that's why these documentation efforts like the ones that Joe was talking about are so important, because we have to be able to communicate the architecture both from the perspective of functioning and running code, but also so that people want to go and look at the code. They have to be able to say, well, does this make sense at a higher level? Does this make sense at a business level? Does this make sense in terms of the optics? Does this make sense in terms of community and penetration? So all of those things are driving the documentation effort. And so I'm again, that's why I'm very grateful about the work going on. Let's see, other updates. I think DC, you've been giving some really interesting thought to adaptive trees, moving to the even more fun stuff, the technical stuff. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. I can give a brief kind of overview of where I am, if you like.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been looking at data structures which will allow us to, we have to, eventually the running code has to be persisted somewhere to a file system. So I've been looking at data structures which will allow us to represent the kind of style of program and state that we're going to be wanting to represent in RChain. And I have been specifically investigating implementations of tries or radix trees, with the intention of of laying the groundwork for reading and writing to the database, so that we can start kind of playing with that. And I've got to. I'm actually on away this week on holiday, so I haven't made too much. I've too much progress on that recently, but I'm at the stage where kind of I've actually got a bunch of kind of technical considerations which we need to kind of discuss at a stand-up, and after that point we could start writing code. I've got some Scala code in a repository which is already running a kind of a basic radix tree. It's about 100 lines. You can actually write. I found out by using the standard kind of Scala collections library. You can use that to build a radix tree pretty easily, something basic. And then on top of that, we need to, there's a whole bunch of other considerations when you start thinking about writing to the database, and whether our data structure is going to be mutable or immutable, and all those kinds of things make the implementation potentially more complex. But yeah, that's what I've been looking at. I'm looking forward to getting home in the next few days and having a dev environment where I can start committing some examples for other people to look at.
That's really awesome. I mean, I'm very excited about this approach. Also, one of the things that has come up in the meeting here that I really want to stress, that the group here, pretty much because this is enterprise speak, they keep talking about APIs and clear interfaces, and what I've been trying to get them to understand is that API is probably too early. API is probably too aggressive, and that there's a newer, a better way to factor things that it sort of looks like an API initially, but it's actually much richer, and this is kind of the monadic design pattern. Then I kind of back that up and I said, look, big data, reactive data has been heavily influenced and by the reactive design pattern, the monadic reactive design pattern, and this has had a huge uptake within the enterprise since about 2008. And so the more we can illustrate this for both the public and private chains, that access to storage can be well factored behind the monadic reactive design pattern, that access to comms can be well factored behind the monadic design pattern. The better I think things will be, both for the standards, but also for specific implementations. It's just, at this point, it's, again, this is my opinion, but I think it's just a no-brainer to utilize the reactive or the monadic design patterns.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, cool. So a reactive adaptive tree, whoa. That's going to be valuable to lots of applications, not just blockchains.
Yeah.
I'm looking on GitHub right now, and people have already done implementations of concurrent radix trees, which would be in Java, not in Scala, but still. So I mean, it's out there.
Nice.
Yeah. What I'd like to do is build on one of Scala's immutable collections, so that we do something like, we treat the database or the tree structure the same way that you would in something like Haskell, where it's a value where we can offer those kinds of guarantees.
So specifically to that point, I mean, you're familiar with the zipper construct, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
If I would heartily recommend for traversing and mutating to use a variant of Oleg's flavor of zipper.
Okay.
And that's factored relative to, I mean, that works for a wide range of data structures. Yeah. If we can talk about it more at Dev Stand Up, but if people are interested in this, I heartily recommend the use of zippers, and in particular Oleg's style or flavor of zipper. He took it all the way to file system. So he's got a file system he calls ZFS, which is implemented in this style. and it gives you a really nice factorization of transactional characteristics.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna just step away for about 3 minutes. I'll be right back. But you guys keep talking.
Okay, well, I think, for the purposes of this meeting, I'm pretty, that's, I don't think I've got too much more to explain this. If I've got any questions or anything like that, I'll pass on to someone else.
I guess with respect to mutable data, wouldn't that doesn't that somehow translate into a process state in the Rolang?
Sorry, what was the question, Jim?
Mutable data.
Mutable data. So I get something like just state that can change.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in terms of storage, where it was, the immutable and mutable storage was brought up. I'm just relating that to.
Yeah. So I can expand on that a little bit. So there's obviously. What we're looking at is having some kind of address system, basically, or some kind of system of names where we can that we can transact on, and transacting on that system of names is obviously going to result in updated state for the for the name or the address that's been transacted on. But I was talking so we need to allow, obviously, for state to change. Otherwise, the system's not going to be very useful. I was talking more at a kind of a low level of how we treat the database, because in a concurrent system, if you allow the database to be mutable, that's going to that just makes updating the database much harder. So treating the database, as a value, it's just a kind of a design approach. It doesn't mean that you can't update the database. It's a design approach, which means that the way you update the database gives more guarantees about who can do what. So
yeah. So I think there is maybe a slight misconception between the idea of mutable state and mutable data structure. David, you were talking about a mutable data structure, or an immutable data structure.
Yes.
But especially in the adaptive radix tree paper that we were just reading, the idea is that to a certain extent it is mutable only under specific circumstances. And in terms of mutable state, Jim, state will be mutated or operated on or transitioned only under very controlled circumstances, or under very controlled conditions, which are outlined by the address and by the conditions of a namespace.
Well, why don't we make a slightly different use of language? We'll talk about transacted state.
Transacted state, okay.
Right. So the transacted state it can be mutated in a transactionally safe way under certain conditions, and those conditions are, there's a set of conditions that make it possible to have safe transactions that's given by the blockchain semantics, but it's still possible to write races in Roland contracts, right? So then you have to ask at the application level, is the state safe? Well, if someone commits, a race condition and they didn't intend it, right, as a part of their application, then the state isn't safe at the application level, right?
Right.
So there's layers to this onion that we have to be aware of.
Yeah, exactly.
So, guys, I'm sorry to detract from the conversation. I have a quick question about the tokens, real quick. Though this is coming from Bitcoin Talk.
Yeah, sure.
This is not really a question, but it's a statement, and maybe you guys can go into it. But the guy's saying, ideally, if they intended it to be fair, each investor would have at least one AMP and one RChain token. I guess they're kind of talking about like ETC. Not to mention that the two segregated projects are worse than the whole. Okay, that's a different point. But the question is really why not just like, just give one rock token to, why are we doing this differently is really the question.
First of all, it's really about the fact that the people who participated in the 2CO, they participated by and large from every metric of the market signal that I could think of, because they believed in RChain. Now, all the funding and all the value was stolen or shifted away from the RChain efforts. And so this is about giving those people this ability to realize what they intended. They intended to see RChain, and that was super clear, right? I mean, so let's look at the facts on the ground. The social network proposal raised $120,000. The 2CO with the RChain proposal behind it raised just under $5 million. So that's a pretty clear market signal. But then over and above that, I then went and personally talked to every single investor I could talk to. And every single investor that I talked to, and I talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, they were in this for RChain. So now, if RChain has no resources behind it that came from the people who put resources into it, that's a mistake. That's wrong, right? And so this is about giving those people the possibility of seeing at least some of the value that they put in manifest in RChain. Now, flipping it around, because certain people within Scenario made a decision not to follow through on their promises with respect to the 2CO, it doesn't make any sense to support their activities, right? So we're no longer going to be supporting the AMP. And this is because they have effectively, done something wrong to the people who supported the project. And so we can't support that kind of activity. But what we will do is give everyone who has provided, who did want to see the RChain project come to life, and they see the potential, we will give them an opportunity so that their AMPs can find a path to utility on the RChain network. So from that point of view, the RChain network is happening. It will be possible, and like Ethereum, in order to run compute or run contracts on the RChain network, you have to have a token. And again, as I've said many times before, this is a part of the denial of service protection. So with that, so in order to have access to that token, there's a pathway for AMP holders to get to that token. And that's what's being provided here in the redemption process. So from my point of view, and I'm sure others on the RChain board might state it differently, this is making sure that the value that the people who participated in the 2CO, placed in the 2CO, finds a way to flow into RChain. If we simply split the token, it doesn't happen.
Okay, so what? Just real quick on the mechanics of why it doesn't happen. I'm just kind of confused. If you split the token just cleanly, why doesn't it?
Well, okay, so the token itself. So none of the money that was raised for the token, none of the fiat cash or the Bitcoin goes to RChain, right? So RChain can't have access to those funds. And right now, we're not listing the RChain, the rock on the exchanges. people will do that, but we're not listing it. So we are unable to realize any of the value that people participating in the 2CO did through that mechanism. Right? So there's no mechanism by which the value that they put in flows into RChain. RChain has to produce other mechanisms of value, which we are doing at an enormous rate, but none of the value that the participants in the 2CO sale flows into RChain unless you take the path that I've described here.
Thank you, great. That's more than adequate. I think that's a really good explanation. So thanks.
Oh, good. I hope it's understandable. And if other people want to clarify or jump in, please feel free. Awesome. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the other updates. Is Evan on? I don't see him.
I think he's driving back from Olympia, or maybe he's back.
Oh,
but
yeah, I got it. Understood. Yeah.
He finished the filing of the articles of incorporation this morning, actually.
Fantastic.
This afternoon will be our first board meeting to approve the bylaws and the other kind of process around the redemption.
Exactly. That was the other updates I wanted to give the community. So our articles have been filed. We have our first board meeting, and you know the entity is effectively in existence. So I think we should all like celebrate. You know, woot! You know, RChain Cooperative is a thing. So I'm very, very excited about that. I think it marks a real watershed moment, and I think everyone here should feel proud. You know, everyone who's contributed, even if they contributed just by lobbying really difficult questions our way for us to have to ponder and work out solutions to, everyone here should feel proud about this event, and you know, we have a lot more coming down the pipe. I'm super excited about the next step, which is starting to get the source to source. Again, I'm sorry I keep going back to tech stuff, but that's you know, part of the way I get to where I get a lot of my energy. But part of the next step, now that we've got storage underway, we can do a quick prototype of the compiler by going source to source. So we can provide a compilation mechanism from Roland contracts down into Rosette code. And then we're independent of whether we're using the old VM or the new VM, right? So you can try out the Roland contracting mechanism on the old VM bytecode, and with the and that can fit even with the existing storage layer, right? So as the storage layer comes on board, when we instantiate a virtual machine, we can make a decision about whether to instantiate the C++ virtual machine and call into that through JNI, or instantiate the JVM Scala-based implementation. So the beauty of that is that we can be making lots of parallel progress and testing everything out. So that's why I'm quite excited about the rate that progress will be happening on that front. Additionally, we're going to want to start pounding on this with contracts. And so over the weekend, because the Coin Fund guys have been so graciously giving us their time. So Alex Bolkin, for example, has been diving into Rolang and the RoVM and the semantics there, and has been asking lots of great questions about how do I write a contract that does this? How do I write a contract that does that? So over the weekend, I wrote a little tutorial which describes all of the sort of basic data structures. So if you were, it's clear that if you wanted to, you wouldn't do this, but if you wanted to, you could implement the natural numbers as Java data structures, or you could implement the natural numbers as Haskell data structures. And actually, sometimes there are good reasons to do that. Like if you wanted to do infinite precision as opposed to fixed precision, you might want to have a programmatic representation of numeric concepts. So I provided a contract for the natural numbers. I provided similar kinds of contracts for the Booleans. I provided contracts for linked lists. I provided, so these are all familiar data structures, and then just to have some fun, I provided a contract for an infinite precision style approach to the numbers. That gives you numbers, all the numbers that we know of to date. So that means I provided a contract to implement Conway's surreal numbers, and part of this is to show how easy it is to do both the familiar programming, like we do, every day with integers and floats and booleans and things like that, but also how easy it is to take sophisticated mathematical specifications and turn them into Roland contracts. And I believe that that's going to be important, because what we want is we want to be able to, on the one hand, realize sophisticated mathematical ideas as might be expressed in a particular financial instrument. So to quickly realize those ideas directly into Roland code. But also, we want to be able to import all of the cool mathematical reasoning that happens in these sophisticated mathematical specs over into reasoning about the code. And because it's so easy to facilitate the transfer from one to the other, you can also transfer the reasoning about these mathematical specifications over to reasoning about the code. And this is part of what's going on. This is so well facilitated in Roland that you can automate a great deal of it. So this is what's going on in the behavioral type stuff, is the behavioral types automates a great deal of reasoning about Roland contracts, which is what will provide us with a level of security and safety for these contracts that has yet to be seen in not only in the blockchain space, but throughout programming languages in general. So again, it's just that kind of stuff is super exciting. Let me turn, lest we feel unbalanced, let me turn attention and sort of ask people where we think our greatest challenges are right now. Like if anyone wants to chime in, Ed, Ian, Jim, anybody, where we think some of the greatest challenges might be, so that people, don't think that we're going into this with rose-colored glasses.
Just short term, the next obviously 10 days. There's gonna be a lot of people in Bitcoin talk. I mean, that's very short term. That's tangible. There's a person asking right now. There's 1 billion RChain tokens. What if Scenario burns amps in the near future? There's gonna be 1,000,001 questions like that. So if we could just this event just kind of help people understand what's going on, that'll be good. And then the floor is that's all my concerns are for just the next 10 days.
Yeah, understood. And I think those are very, very good concerns. I mean, I think related to that, just making sure that everyone has the chance to get, find out about the process and to participate in the process. I think that's a big challenge, right? Just shouting from the rooftops, hey, this is happening, so that AMP holders know. I know personally, I've had to repeat the description of the AMP redemption process, thousands of times now. and it's going to be a lot more. So that is quite a challenge. It's a challenge for me.
Right. You know, and just, you know, after the next 10 days, I mean, you know, really, you know, two things I see here going forward. You know, we have obviously an odd number board, so we're not going to reach as many deadlocks. But really, you know, I feel like management can become a big issue, and working together. And you know, I talked kind of internally with some of the guys here, and you know, I would really like the community in really general sense just come up with proposals and you know, come talk to the directors, and if that line of communication can stay more fluid and definitely more transparent than what it was under the scenario management, that would be really great, because I think transparency is a really good thing. And you know, specifically, you know, a lot of marketing was done as work in scenario, and I think, you know, we really want to make this a more tech-driven project and not a marketing project. So I really would just like to see more technical development within the community specifically and supporting those efforts. I already reached out to people in Philadelphia, specifically some Ethereum developers, and they're already asking about Rolang. Is that the Rolang project? So people already know what's going on, but we need to really, you know, make sure their needs and concerns and all the educational resources are there so people can start acting. Yeah.
Agreed. I think a lot sorry, I was just looking at the chat for a second. So the getting the word out part, sometimes we call that marketing. But really it's sort of information dissemination. And that is a big challenge, and it's tough. And one of the